So I'd like to introduce Marc Bernegger to the podcast. We've been speaking for a while now, back and forth about crypto, and Marc has some great insights in the space as an investor, and also he's a member of the board at Finance AG, Crypto Finance Conference, and Falcon Bank. So yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast, Marc. How you doing?
Yes, hi, how are you? Happy to be here.
No, it's great to have you. So let's bring it back for anyone who doesn't know you. What was your first experience with crypto?
After I exited my last own company, I started to look mainly into the fintech space. That was back in 2010, and also did quite a few investments in the fintech space. And as you can imagine, the whole payment industry is a big part of it. So in 2012, I was a little bit deeper looking into new ways how to transfer assets and money, and that was a little bit the first time I got in contact with the white paper of Satoshi, meaning that I realized that there's something called Bitcoin, which might have a huge impact on our system and our society. So yeah, back in 2012, that was literally my first interaction via Bitcoin, where that I realized that something like blockchain is existing.
Okay. So what got you into fintech? Because I know you previously an entrepreneur in technology itself, but with Uzgang. But what got you into fintech? What made you think of investing in financial technology?
Back in 1999, when I founded my first tech company, it's still existing. It's a nightlife platform here in Switzerland. I just used the new possibilities of the web, of the internet, to bring information to broader masses. So back then it was more like using the internet as a tool. And my second company was also in the event space. So naturally, as somebody surrounded by a lot of people here in Zurich, which are working in the financial services industry for big banks and other institutions in this field, I was always fascinated by the fact that one of the most digital industries all over the world, meaning the financial services industry, was not really in the same extent digitized like other more traditional industries. So out of this fascination, I wanted to understand why the banks were not digitized yet, and that's why I moved into this. Back then we called it Finance 2.0. Nowadays everybody talks about fintech, so that was a little bit the reason why I moved into this space.
Okay. So I know you're a big part of the Crypto Finance Conference, which has just passed. How was what was the sentiment like with the conference this year?
The sentiment was definitely quite different than 1 year ago. Back in January 2018, it was all about where's the Bitcoin heading? Is it 100,000 or half a million? So that's definitely that changed quite a bit. But besides that, I would say we still had a very high class lineup on stage, and again, a very interesting, very powerful, and very well known guests in the audience. So the content was far more about the substance and the essence of cryptocurrencies, including blockchain, and also far more about sustainable real use cases and less about speculation like a year ago.
Okay, so less speculation, and more talking about the technology. Okay, so what were some of the challenges you faced coming into this year? Because last year we know the challenges, especially on the market perspective. But what were some of the challenges you faced building up to the conference?
On the one side, as you can imagine, it was more difficult to attract partners and sponsors. Last year we refused, I think, more than 40 ICO related projects which literally want to give us money to be on stage or to be present. So that definitely changed. On the other hand, we, as you might know, all our participants have to apply. So it's not that you just buy a ticket and then you'll be part of it. You really have to apply. We do background checks and then manually approve all the applications, so we can really verify that we only have high level investors in the audience. So we again had more applications than available seats, but it was also not like last time where we had, I think, 4 times the applications compared to the available seats. So that also changed a little bit. On the other side, I think by focusing on high quality investors, we have a small niche. I mean, in total, we had 260 people at the event, roughly 60 speakers, and the rest were mainly the investors I mentioned. So we have a little bit a different concept than most other conferences. So we're quite niche, quite small, which makes it perhaps a little bit easier to still get fully booked in the crypto winter compared to a conference which perhaps attracts thousands of people.
Okay. So being a venture capitalist and an investor yourself, what's the most challenging thing about investing in this space, and what do you see coming into this year?
I mean, personally, I'm a little bit surprised that some of the most relevant indicators of investing outside crypto seem to be completely irrelevant in the last few months. I mean, before the crypto winter started. So for me, it doesn't matter in which industry you are. At the end, it's always about very smart and passionate founders and people about real relevant use case and a problem solving approach which ultimately generates sustainable and long-term revenues. So if these elements are inexistent, then I normally I don't look into a case, and I think there are quite a few also quite well-known projects which miss all of these three elements and still raised a lot of money. So for me, that's a little bit an indication of the hype we saw, especially last year. So that's why I think as an entrepreneur now also being active as an investor, nothing changed when it comes to the most relevant factors to invest into a company.
Okay, so if I'm an entrepreneur, or I have a project and I'm looking for investment, or I'm looking for a member of the board like yourself, what do I need to show in this current market environment that separates me from the rest? What do you think?
I mean,
What do you think that
in
everyone's looking for?
general, as I just said, I mean, you have to be really driven by the mission of your venture. You have to be in not for the money, but for the long-term perspective. So I want to see this fire in the eyes of the founders, and you really have to solve a problem which is ultimately generating revenue. So I'm completely not interested in any case which somehow tries to sell a vision, but there is absolutely no number related approach. So just by using the blockchain, it doesn't mean that you have different rules like in the other traditional world. So that's why this completely this neglection of any which is of any part which is money and revenue driven is something I hardly ever saw since the dot-com bubble. So it's all about earning money and creating value. And if you use the blockchain technology, that's nice, but it's not the only driver which attracts somebody as an investor. So you ultimately have to have a real business case.
Okay. I know you're a part of the Crypto Finance AG, a member of the board, and also I know you're a part of the Falcon Bank. You're a member of the board there too. What is it about institutions and crypto? Are we moving into an institutional period of crypto, or are they just trying to get on the bandwagon as well? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I would say in this last 3 to 6 months in the background, we saw far more relevant developments than in all the months and years before. People always think that the price of Bitcoin is the only indication which shows a little bit the status of the industry, but I would say it's even the opposite. I mean, the price of Bitcoin, at least in the past, was mainly driven by speculation, which is completely unrelated to the underlying technology. And I mean, that's exactly what we also saw during the dot-com bubble. I would say that the most relevant developments happened after the bubble bursted, because then you really had the serious and sustainable players joining the whole industry. And that's what we see, at least at the Crypto Finance Group. I mean, literally every week we talk to the big players which are now moving into this space. And my friends always approach me and say, yeah, so why is the price of Bitcoin not increasing? But I think these two developments are a little bit separate, at least at the moment.
So do you think that institutions getting into the space is a positive thing for the industry
I mean,
itself?
it depends a little bit from which perspective you're looking into it. I mean, personally, I'm a big believer in decentralization and also the power of currencies like Bitcoin to empower the masses and to also take some of the existing monopoly or oligopoly from governments back to the people. But from a, let's say, more traditional perspective, I think it's a good thing that you have more traditional players moving into the field and also building a serious foundation that crypto assets are becoming more relevant and mainstream. I mean, for everybody who was in the space already in the early days, I think it's great that you, at least on the paper, became extremely rich by just having some coins. But I think that's not really generating a sustainable and long-term value. So if you really want to generate a value for and real use cases out of this crypto asset class, you still need the existing world and the existing players. Everything else is a little bit a fantasy which is normally not materializing.
Okay. So being Swiss yourself, would you say that Switzerland at the moment is at the top of the list in the industry when it comes to
Yeah,
crypto?
definitely. I mean, I'm traveling quite extensively. I was in Singapore a few weeks ago. Then we had our own crypto finance conference in California a few months ago. And I'm always surprised to see how far behind all these traditional tech bots are. I mean, I think Switzerland is definitely not ahead of the curve, at least when it comes also to monetize tech innovations. But in the crypto blockchain space, I think we're definitely quite ahead of literally all traditional famous tech spots. I mean, also when you go to Berlin or London, you have a lot of tech talent, you have a lot of traditional VCs and an ecosystem. But the relevant people, especially not the latecomers, which joined 1 or 2 or 3 years ago, but the early birds. I mean, as you know, Ethereum and quite a few other very relevant projects, they were all founded here in the crypto valley, and main drivers behind, meaning the founders and the early supporters, they're also still here in the area. So I think that the real foundation, or a big part of the foundation of this whole crypto asset world, is still based here in Switzerland. We have a very crypto friendly regulator. We have a lot of smart people from all over the world moving to the crypto valley slash crypto nation. So at the moment, I think we're still quite ahead of the curve. I mean, you have other jurisdictions like Malta, Liechtenstein, and other ones also quite fastly moving into the space. But I think especially when it comes to more traditional, more conservative institutions, I think Switzerland has definitely a little bit a different standing compared to these jurisdictions.
Sure, definitely, I agree. I think in regards to privacy, the placement where Switzerland is in the world, I think it's definitely a perfect spot for all crypto projects and everything to do with the blockchain, and also in regards to the cantons as well. That's also something everybody who's Swiss lets me know that they're used to decentralization through the
Yeah, and it's
cantons.
also interesting. I mean, I'm in the whole tech space now since close to 20 years, and I mean, there are quite a few very well-known names and also VC companies which literally never ever passed by Switzerland in the past. I mean, they know Berlin, they know London, they know Amsterdam and some other hotspots in Europe. Besides focusing on their markets in the US and now more and more focusing on Asia. But now, since we have this whole blockchain revolution, you see these guys quite regularly passing by. So that shows a little bit that the outreach is definitely going a little bit further than we ever saw before in other industries.
Okay, so we've got to the point of the podcast where I ask you 3 questions. So let's start off with the first question, which is name your 3 favorite companies in the space.
Okay, that's a tough question. But I mean, I just returned from Definity. They have their office, I would say, 400 meters away from our crypto villa here in Zurich. I think Definity is definitely one of the most ambitious and also most solid emerging blockchain related companies I know. I guess you're aware about the fact that they raised a 3-digit sum from top tier VCs from the Silicon Valley and literally want to become some kind of the next Ethereum plus plus plus. So I think that's definitely a project you should focus on. I mean, another one everybody knows, and I'm personally quite convinced that it will also change a lot, is boring Telegram. I mean, I had the pleasure to meet the founder last year in Davos during the World Economic Forum. And since then we have a certain interaction, and I have to say that the passion and also, let's say, the background of Pavel is really astonishing. So that's also an entrepreneur, even with a lot of success in the past. He's fully driven and passionate about his project. So there I really see a lot of fire. They have a lot of firepower as well after they raised their money. And I mean, I think that Telegram, not just the messenger, but everything they want to do with the money they raised could also change a lot. I mean, by creating a decentralized platform where no government will be able in future to stop the interaction. I think also from a non-business perspective, that's a very, very unique and ambitious project. And I mean, I think in general, perhaps without naming a specific project, I think we will see quite a few next wave projects coming now out of the space, which are not calling them as the next big blockchain project, but will just have real use cases enabled by the blockchain technology. So I would call them the hidden champions, which are not using the term blockchain just to raise money and to get media visibility. And I think there you see quite a few interesting projects emerging, a little bit emerging out of the ashes of the post crypto bubble. So I think a few of these projects will be far more well known in a few months from now without really always using the hype term of blockchain and crypto.
Okay, so that was Definity, Telegram, and real use cases, new projects that are coming out right now. Okay,
Exactly,
fantastic.
without naming them yet.
Yeah, because who knows them? but yeah, so the second question I'm going to ask you is, what industry do you think will be disrupted by blockchain the most?
I mean, ultimately, that's also a reason why I'm mainly focusing on it at the moment. I think the financial services industry, just by nature, will see a huge disruption. I mean, currencies, trade finance, logistics, everything which is extremely outdated when you look at the potential increase of efficiency caused by blockchain technology. And if you would ask me what might be the next industry, I think government is also quite obvious, because I mean, a lot of the existing processes and setups just are not how they should be and how they could be. And I think that's also one of the reasons why it will be interesting how politics tries to regulate blockchain in their own field. So I think we will see a lot of disruption in politics and governments caused by blockchain technology.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so that was finance and governments, and I think definitely we're going to see huge disruptions on both of those. So the final question is, how would you describe cryptocurrencies, or some people like to call them crypto assets, to a 6-year-old?
Okay, that's also a good question. I mean, I think it depends a little bit because if you would have asked me back in my early days as a kid, I think we would have lived in a completely different time, right? So back then, it was still natural to use physical coins and notes. So I think that already changes quite a lot. I mean, I have two kids myself, and I think for them it's already becoming a little bit weird to use traditional coins and notes. It's just fun to play with it, but literally they see me hardly ever using it anymore. So I always pay by credit card, right? But I would say at the end, it's just the natural next development of digitizing something we did in the last 100 years. Now in a digital world, you don't need the physical notes and coins anymore. So I would say to a 6-year-old, it's just an invisible way to pay for services and goods, and it's something which was not existing when I was a kid, but something you will always use when you're becoming a teenager or somebody working and earning some money.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, so I think I think it's good to always talk about it with your kids. My son, he likes chocolate money. So
Yes.
and then that's his favorite type of money. But no, fantastic. So thank you for that, Mark. What's the best way for anybody who's listening to get in contact with yourself?
I mean, ideally, reach out to me via email, but I mean, I can already warn you, I only invest in projects where I know the founders since quite a few years. That's a little bit my natural limiting factor. So that's why I'm not looking for additional projects. But if you see any
It's a good disclaimer.
synergy exactly to partner with some of the companies I'm involved, the old-fashioned email is still the best way. And besides that, I think yeah, we will see quite a few exciting developments. Feel free to follow me on my social media channels where I'm happy to share what I'm focusing on. And I think together we can really build an exciting and long-term and sustainable industry based on crypto assets and blockchain technology.
Okay, thank you for your time on the podcast, Mark. It's always good to speak to you. Hopefully, we can do this again, and I'll speak to you soon.
Same here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.